Hey guys, Conor Orr from Sports Illustrated and the MMQB, and I've picked all 272 NFL games this season, so you don't even have to watch. But before we get going, let's address last year, as I do this every year, and last year seemed to be abnormally bad, a little bit worse than normal. My big mistakes. I had Arizona Cardinals winning one game. Thought that team was going to kind of free fall for Caleb Williams and then maybe get rid of Kyler Murray. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers I had winning 3 games. Similarly, thought they were going to deal some of their guys, especially some of these veterans coming up on big contracts like Mike Evans by the trade deadline. That ended up not happening, playing tough with Baker Mayfield, and they had that boost with Dave Canales as the offensive coordinator. And I had the Houston Texans finishing 5-12. In the preseason, liked Bryce Young a lot more, and we saw CJ Stroud struggle, but it's a great example of why the preseason isn't always the best indicator of how a quarterback is going to perform, so let's keep that in mind with some of these rookie quarterbacks. I'll start with some of the things that surprised me after I picked all 272 games for this year. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I have finishing 10-7 and making the playoffs. I actually like the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. I know they're hurt, they're banged up a little bit up front, but I feel like they're going to transition to Justin Fields a little bit earlier than people expect, and they have a lot of winnable games built into the early portion of their schedule when they might not be at their best, they might not be at their most cohesive. I'm talking about games against the Broncos, the Chargers, the Colts, the Giants, the Raiders. All these games are in there, and a lot of these teams are vulnerable to that veteran pass rush, that tough defensive style that Pittsburgh plays. If they're able to accentuate that running game and again, get Justin Fields going, help them keep the ball away from their opponents, I think that they're going to have a lot of success. And let's talk about the back end of that schedule, right? The NFL didn't do them any favors by packing the entire AFC North into the end of their schedule, or did they, right? Lamar Jackson has had some injury issues down the stretch. Deshaun Watson has had some injury issues down the stretch. Could they be getting some of their divisional opponents at less than optimal times? Now that also depends on them staying healthy too. So we'll see, but I would not count out the Pittsburgh Steelers. In fact, I have the entire AFC North making the playoffs. A little bit of an oddity now with the 7-team playoff format. Another team that I love, the Green Bay Packers, have a lot going for them in terms of schedule analytics. So let's look at this. No games versus opponents coming off of a bye, and only 2 weeks where they have fewer rest days than their opponents. So a lot to like there. They finished the season with games like Seattle, New Orleans, Minnesota, Chicago. And while we like Chicago, I have them sneaking into the playoffs at 9-8. These are all games where Green Bay should be superior to their opponents. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people with their depth, especially on offense and that receiver core. They were cutting a lot of good players on cutdown day simply because Jordan Love has a lot of weapons, maybe some guys that we're not necessarily talking enough about. Another team that we really like, how about a surprise? The Arizona Cardinals, and no, this is not just because I had them winning one game last year and I'm trying to make up for it. The Cardinals have these big stretches towards the end of the year where they have a lot of winnable games stacked together, and they have a young team, so I'm expecting them to kind of have a little bit more cohesion, playing well towards the end of the season. We have these back-to-back weeks, for example, New England and Carolina right next to each other, where if you're on a bad foot, if you're on a little bit of a losing streak, can help you get right and get you back into the win column. I think they're going to surprise some people, especially based on how tough they played their opponents last year. Last but not least, let's get into the New York Jets. So everyone wants to talk about the New York Jets. I have them just barely missing the playoffs, going 9-8. I think they're going to have a good season, but I think this AFC East is tough. I have Buffalo winning the division at 10-7, Josh Allen eventually winning the MVP, and the Jets and Miami duking it out here for second place. Some of the reasons we don't like the Jets, the schedule is absolutely brutal. And even though they get some of their easier teams, a lot of rookie quarterbacks or backup quarterbacks towards the beginning of the season, it's also in the middle of a big travel stretch. And let's remember, this is a veteran team, right? They have a 40-year-old quarterback. They have 2 offensive tackles in their early 30s. So there's a lot to consider when we're trying to build in a reasonable prediction. The Jets also don't have a lot of games on natural grass surface. And while the jury is out in terms of what actually causes these injuries, a lot of players prefer playing on natural grass. So you look at teams like the Lions, for example. Almost all of their games are indoors. That's a built-in advantage. I think the Jets, as an older team, playing a lot of games on artificial surfaces, probably a built-in disadvantage. I don't know if you would consider that heartbreak or not. I think 9 wins is a good season for this Jets team, even though they have a lot of superstar talent. But let me know what you think. As always, picking all 272 games is an adventure. There's going to be some big swings and some big misses.